Forget Hollywood thrillers. This prisoner swap actually happened, and the stakes couldn't be higher. In a world where international relations are often played out behind closed doors, this was a rare moment when the drama unfolded in full view of the public. The tension, the negotiations, the human stories on both sides, this was the kind of real-life event that makes fiction look tame by comparison. Imagine the anxiety of families waiting for news, the uncertainty of those held in foreign prisons, and the political calculations happening at the highest levels. This was not just a swap of bodies, but a collision of values, laws, and lives. On July 18, 2025, the governments of the United States, Venezuela, and El Salvador orchestrated a jaw-dropping prisoner swap that sent shockwaves through the international community. The deal was announced with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for peace treaties or major diplomatic breakthroughs. Flags from all three countries were displayed at the official event, and news anchors around the world scrambled to cover the story as it broke. For many, it was hard to believe. After months of secret talks, a deal had finally been struck, and the world was watching to see what would happen next. The terms of the swap were staggering. 10 American citizens, including a former Navy SEAL who had been detained for over a year, were exchanged for 252 Venezuelan men. Most of these Venezuelans had been accused of gang affiliations, but the evidence against them was often questionable, and many had never even seen the inside of a courtroom. They had been locked away in El Salvador's infamous Secot mega prison, a facility known for its harsh conditions and controversial reputation. The Americans, meanwhile, had become symbols of diplomatic tension, their fates tied to the shifting winds of international politics. But the story doesn't end with the numbers. Behind every statistic is a human being, and many of those 252 Venezuelans were not hardened criminals but migrants and asylum seekers. They had fled violence, poverty, and political persecution in their home country, only to find themselves swept up in a dragnet under an obscure and centuries-old law, the Alien Enemies Act. This law, dating back to the 18th century, allows the government to detain citizens of countries considered hostile, even if those individuals have committed no crime. In the chaos of modern migration, it became a tool for mass detention. But here's where it gets dark. Many of those migrants were asylum seekers, swept up under an old law called the Alien Enemies Act. For some, their only crime was seeking safety and a better life. They were caught in the crossfire of geopolitics, pawns in a game they never chose to play. The use of the Alien Enemies Act in this context has sparked outrage among human rights advocates who argue that it violates basic principles of justice and due process. Some had no criminal record. They were teachers, students, workers, ordinary people whose lives were upended overnight. Their families were left in limbo, unsure if they would ever see their loved ones again. The psychological toll of indefinite detention, especially for those who had done nothing wrong, cannot be overstated. For many, the experience was a nightmare from which they could not wake. Inside Secot, they faced brutal conditions, daily beatings, forced isolation, and even torture. The prison, designed to hold thousands of inmates, has been criticized by international watchdogs for its overcrowding, lack of medical care, and rampant abuse. Reports from inside describe a world where violence is routine and survival is never guaranteed. Some detainees were kept in solitary confinement for weeks at a time, denied contact with the outside world. Others were subjected to physical and psychological abuse, their pleas for help ignored by guards and officials. Take Andre Hernandez, a makeup artist and LGBTQ advocate, held for 125 days, abused just for being himself. Andre's story is just one among many, but it stands out for its sheer injustice. He was targeted not because of any crime, but because of his identity. In prison, he faced harassment and violence from both guards and fellow inmates. His advocacy for LGBTQ rights made him a target, and his days were filled with fear and uncertainty. Yet even in the darkest moments, he refused to give up hope. His eventual release was a victory, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. He's home now, but what about the others? For every Andre Hernandez who made it out, there are dozens more whose stories remain untold. Families across Venezuela and beyond are still waiting, still hoping for a phone call or a letter. The trauma of separation lingers, and the process of healing will take years, if it ever truly happens. The swap brought relief to some, but for many, the ordeal is far from over. The swap went down at a Salvadoran airport, emotional reunions for some, but critics call it hostage diplomacy. Cameras captured the tearful embraces, the joy of families reunited after months or years apart. But behind the scenes there was a sense of unease. Was this a triumph of diplomacy, or a dangerous precedent? Some experts warn that such deals encourage governments to detain foreigners as bargaining chips, turning human lives into currency for political negotiations. The term hostage diplomacy has been used to describe similar cases in the past, and this swap has reignited the debate. Human rights groups say justice got tossed aside, and the UN is now investigating possible disappearances. Organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have condemned the swap, arguing that it undermines the rule of law and sets a dangerous example. The United Nations has launched an inquiry into reports of forced disappearances and abuses in CICOT and other detention centers. For many, the question is not just about the legality of the swap, but about the morality of using vulnerable people as pawns in international disputes. So, was this a diplomatic masterstroke, or a dangerous game with people's lives? The answer depends on who you ask. For the families of those released, it was a miracle. For the governments involved, it was a calculated risk. For the detainees still left behind, it's a reminder that justice is often the first casualty in the battle for political advantage. The world is watching to see what happens next, and the debate over the ethics of prisoner swaps is far from settled. As new details emerge, the story continues to evolve, raising difficult questions about justice, freedom, and the true cost of diplomacy. Hit like, subscribe, and tell us, would you trade justice for freedom? What would you do if it were your loved one behind bars, or if you were the one caught in the crossfire of international politics? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned as we continue to follow this unfolding story. The world is changing fast, and sometimes the most important questions have no easy answers.